He was North Dakota's infamous governor, who served 2 non-consecutive terms, the first of which ended with his forcible removal from office following 2 felony convictions. A controversial figure who later returned to the state's top office and then became a U.S. Senator, alongside a rapid rise of a new political party that ushered in a progressive era that formed state institutions that still exist today. William Wild Bill Langer and the Nonpartisan League, with your host, Randy Hoffman, on History Talk, where we step back through local history to explore the people, places, and events that shaped our community. History Talk streams exclusively Thursdays at 10 a.m. on KFYR+. William Langer was born on September 30th, 1886 near Castleton. Langer excelled at school, becoming high school valedictorian and passing the bar at age 18, too young to legally practice law. When he continued his education at Columbia, he graduated top of his class. He was admitted to practice law by special session of the Supreme Court on his 21st birthday. He practiced law in Fargo and then Mandan before commencing his successful and equally controversial political career. Langer first entered the public sector when he was appointed Morton County State's Attorney in 1914, beating out his boss for the position. The following year, a new North Dakota political party formed called the Nonpartisan League, or NPL, which was a branch of the Republican Party, formed to support farmers and small business against big business interests, including the still influential McKenzie machine. Langer recognized the League's rapid power grab and affiliated with it. Headquartered in Bismarck, first at the Northwest Hotel and later the Patterson, the Nonpartisan League quickly achieved success and dominated politics for some time. Edward Patterson owned both hotels where the League was headquartered, making an interesting turnabout for the man who was once closely allied with Alexander Mackenzie, who the Patterson Hotel was originally named for. Within a year of its formation, in 1916, League member Lynn Fraser was elected governor with 79% of the vote. The League also won control of both houses after the 1918 election. The Nonpartisan League ushered in a progressive movement that established several state-owned institutions to shift the balance of power away from big business, including the Bank of North Dakota, the North Dakota State Mill, and a state-owned railroad. The Bank of North Dakota, which is the nation's only state-owned bank, and the State Mill both exist today. The Nonpartisan League also pushed hard to ban corporate farming, which the state did in 1932, requiring local ownership. Some of those restrictions have been eased in recent years. The League's dominance came to a temporary end when, in 1921, Governor Fraser was recalled from his position, but it would see a brief resurgence. Despite its origins as a faction within the Republican Party, the Nonpartisan League later merged with the North Dakota's Democratic Party in 1956 to form the North Dakota Democratic Nonpartisan League Party, with the abbreviations D/NPL. The League had become fractured into 2 conflicting sides. The old guard conservatives of the League merged with the state's Republican Party, while the League's liberal members merged with the Democrats. Upon merging, Democrats only held 5 of the 162 state legislative seats. That number grew to 67 within 3 years, as the Democratic Party asserted influence in North Dakota that lasted for decades. Between 1961 and 1992, Democrats controlled the state's highest office for all but 4 years. Langer was arguably the most prominent elected official of the Nonpartisan League, even if his relationship with the League was sometimes antagonistic. He benefited from the League's wave in 1916, elected Attorney General at age 30. Langer's devious practices began early into his political career. In one such example, Langer allegedly organized a social gathering only to have the club raided to amplify his public crusade against liquor. North Dakota had been a dry state since entering the Union. Shortly after becoming Attorney General, Langer charged North Dakota's Secretary of State and later Congressman Thomas Hall with mishandling funds. Hall was quickly exonerated of these charges in what many reported to be politically motivated. Langer's favorability within the League became jeopardized. when he broke away from the League in 1919 and ran against Governor Fraser in a bitter campaign. After losing his first bid for governor, Langer contributed to the efforts to recall Fraser and other elected League members. By 1924, after a brief political pause, Langer was mending fences with the Nonpartisan League and became the League's candidate for Attorney General the following year, narrowly losing the general election. He was eventually elected governor in 1932 and almost immediately began abusing the confines of his power, which would inevitably lead to his 2 felony convictions and forced removal from office 2 years later. Authorities charged Langer with conspiracy to extort funds from federal employees and blocking the orderly operation of an act of Congress. In the first charge, Langer required all state employees to devote 5% of their salaries to the Nonpartisan League and to subscribe to his publication, The Leader. Langer also posted guardsmen at the Executive Mansion to patrol unwanted visitors, and he cleaned house, firing non-conforming employees allegedly without cause. Despite these obvious abuses of power, Langer's support remained quite high. 7 others were originally charged with Langer. 4 of them stood trial, and 2 of which were employees of the Leader. The trial began on May 22nd in Fargo and spanned more than 3 weeks. 12 jurors were to decide the fate of their provocative governor. Langer and his co-defendants entered a plea of not guilty and denied all charges. The deadlock jury deliberated for 60 hours before voting to convict Langer and his co-defendants at 11:25 p.m. on June 16, 1934, delivering the verdict shortly after midnight. The convicted faced a maximum fine of $10,000 and up to 2 years in prison. Langer was sentenced to 18 months in prison and required to pay the maximum fine. 3 of his co-defendants were sentenced to 13 months in prison, with a fine of $3,000. The remaining co-defendant, Harold McDonald, was sentenced to only 4 months. Following his felony convictions, the North Dakota Supreme Court ordered that Langer be removed from office and replaced by his lieutenant governor, Ole Olson. Langer did not relinquish his position willingly. When the United States Congress officially recognized Olson as governor, Langer declared North Dakota's secession from the United States. He then declared martial law and called a special legislative session, where he would appear before the House and proclaim, "I am still your governor." Langer called for impeaching members of the state Supreme Court and his replacement, Ole Olson. Finally accepting his fate, Langer eventually stepped down and Olson assumed governorship. Even so, the combative former governor remained residing at the governor's mansion. Langer's wife, Lydia, ran for governor later that year, but she lost. After 3 additional trials, Langer was acquitted of all charges and then re-elected governor, serving again from 1937 to 1939. After serving his second term as governor, which weren't 4-year terms until 1964, North Dakota elected him to the U.S. Senate, where his past transgressions became a hurdle and almost disqualified him from serving. Several North Dakotans petitioned the Senate not to seat Langer. He was seated pending an investigation into his character that could jeopardize his seat. That investigation took a year and produced a 4,200-page report proclaiming Langer to be morally unfit to serve, chiefly citing his actions during and after his felony trial. The dissenting opinion argued that North Dakotans were aware of Langer's questionable moral character when electing him. They noted that the Constitution made no reference to, quote, moral purity. At that March, Langer's fellow senators debated his character for weeks before voting 2-1 to uphold Langer's seat. He won 3 more Senate terms, remaining a senator until dying in office in 1959. His funeral was held in the Senate chamber. As a senator, Langer eventually served as Judiciary Committee chairman and was noted to be one of only 2 senators to vote against the United Nations Charter. That was our look at William Wild Bill Langer and the Nonpartisan League. I invite you to check out my 2 Bismarck history books. They are available to purchase on Amazon and select local bookstores. Copies are also available at the Bismarck Public Library. Visit bismarckbook.com for more information. Next, we'll learn about establishing Bismarck's first utilities, the waterworks, telephone, and electricity, including a look at Hughes Electric. Is there a local history topic you'd like to be featured? Email suggestions to historytalk@kfyrtv.com.